Hey guys, Will from Around the Grounds here, and in today's video we're going to be doing the NRL Round 4 tips for this season. We're going to be looking at the team list and predicting who's going to win based off that. We're also going to be having a guest on for this video. I'm going to bring on my girlfriend Jackie, and she's going to come on and predict who she thinks is going to win. We're going to be doing this every week from now on. We're going to get a random guest, we're going to put them on, and we're just going to see how many tips the guests can get throughout the whole season. With that being said guys, let's jump straight into it. Alright guys, now moving on to the first game of the round, we have the Titans versus the West Tigers here at 8 PM on Thursday. This match here is going to be a bit interesting because the Titans are without a few players. They're without Jaden Campbell and Philip Sammy, which I think are a pretty big outs for them, especially for such an inexperienced side such as the Titans. I think that might hurt them more than it would if they were a more experienced side. And for the Tigers, they had a close game against the Warriors, but they were pretty dreadful. I mean, both sides in that game were pretty dreadful. No one really deserved to win in that game, in my opinion, and get points from it. With that being said, this game, I'm going to lean towards the Titans here because I think they're the better team. We've seen that in the first few rounds here. Their attack has been really good. If they can work on their defense and be consistent, they can push for a top 8 this season, I think. And for the Tigers, it's just about getting consistency in their performances at least. Even if they're not winning, at least making it competitive and just building off that. But in terms of this game, I think the Titans will be too good for the Tigers here, and I think the Tigers will put a good performance in, and I think because the Titans have a few good players out, it could be a bit closer than it should be. So with that being said, I'm going to say the Titans are going to win 20 to the Tigers 16. Alright guys, let's see who Jackie thinks is going to win for the first game.
So the Titans versus the Tigers. The Tigers are doing very bad this season, so I think the Titans are going to win 24 to 14.
Alright guys, now moving on to the first game of Friday, we have the Cronulla Sharks versus the Newcastle Knights here at 6 PM. This game's going to be a pretty good game, I reckon. Both these teams are in the top 8, they're both doing well. This is 3rd versus 4th. The Sharks have won their last 2, and obviously the Knights lost to the Panthers last week, but they were down a man for most of the game because of Mitch Barnett's silly mistake he made in the game, which ultimately cost them, because I think the Knights are actually quite good against the Panthers, and I think if they had 13 men, that scoreline could have been a lot different, because I don't think the Panthers played as well as the score said. But for the Knights, they've been surprise packers for me this year. I did not expect them to be this competitive so early. I thought it would take time for their halves to click, but Jake Clifford and Adam Clune, they've been really good so far, and if they can continue that, they'll be competitive in every game they have. In terms of the team list, Kalen Ponga is back for the Knights, which is a big in for them. He'll add the spark and probably the finishing that they needed against the Panthers last week. And then for the Sharks, they seem to be pretty much the same. Sia Talakai is named as centre, which I don't know if he's a centre naturally, but he's in there for now, and Ronaldo Militalo is also back. For this game could go either way. Both these sides could win this one. Pretty much whoever rocks up of the day and plays the best will win, because I think these guys are pretty evenly matched at the moment from what I can see. The Sharks, they've won 2 in a row, back at their home ground, which they haven't played at for a few years until this season, and I think that's going to give them the slight edge. So with that being said, I'm going to predict the Sharks 22 to the Knights 18. Alright guys, now moving on to the second game, let's see who Jackie thinks is going to win.
Well, because the Knights have one of their players out for 6 weeks, I do think the Sharks are going to win. So I'm going to say 26 to 22.
Alright guys, now moving on to the last game on Friday, the 8 PM kickoff, we have the grand final rematch between the Panthers and the Rabbitohs. This game's going to be awesome. There's a lot of storylines around this one, especially with Jai Arrow and how he wants to get back at kick-out and test up Cleary and stuff, and that's obviously a big in for Panthers as they have Nathan Cleary back this week. And that is much needed for the Panthers because I think they lacked a little bit of his quality in the last few games. In terms of the teams list, I think the Panthers, they have a few outs. Fisher Harris is out, Liam Martin are out, but they're also naming reserves, so it wouldn't surprise me if Ivan Cleary's trying to do some mind games here, and it wouldn't surprise me if at least one of them comes back into the team just before the game starts and when the team lists are announced. For the Rabbitohs, they look pretty much the same as last week against the Roosters. They were pretty impressive, but the Roosters were also pretty poor, so this match will be good to see where the Rabbitohs are actually at. The Rabbitohs will be fired up because no one likes losing a grand final, and if you verse the people that beat you in the grand final, you're generally going to be wanting to beat and prove a point. With that being said, with the Panthers playing at home, I don't think they've lost at the Panthers Stadium for like 2 years or something. They have built a fortress there and they haven't lost there in ages, and I think with Nathan Cleary back, if the Rabbitohs start slow, they're not going to win this game. The Rabbitohs have to start fast and they have to get a few tries early, put some pressure onto the Panthers and make it close, but I just don't think that's going to happen just based on how inconsistent the Rabbitohs have been so far. So with that being said, I'm going to predict a close game-ish, and I'm going to predict the Panthers 18 to the Rabbitohs 12. Alright guys, now moving on to Jackie for the third game for the Panthers versus the Rabbitohs.
Well, with the Panthers, I'm very, very sad that my favourite Brian To'o isn't playing. With that, I think it may affect them a little bit, but Cleary is coming back, so I am going to say that the Panthers are going to win 24 to the Rabbits 18.
Alright guys, now moving on to the first game of Saturday, we have the Warriors versus the Broncos here. The Broncos came off a loss against the Cowboys and they were quite disappointing. The Warriors just snuck a victory against the Tigers in a scrappy affair, but they didn't look that convincing in doing so. This game could go either way. I have no idea how to predict this one. It's a Warriors home game, but it's in Redcliffe right next to Brisbane, so really it's just a Broncos home game. They just get to go have a little holiday away at Redcliffe. I think the Broncos will turn back. They'll put in a better performance than they did against the Cowboys because they were disappointing against the Cowboys. Adam Reynolds had a pretty bad game for his standards, and I'm sure he'll be raring to go for this one. The Warriors, they're without Sean Johnson again, obviously at halfback. I'm just not convinced with their spine at the moment with Reece Walsh, Harris DeVita and Cody Nikorima. I just don't think there's a one proper halfback there to control the game. I think they're all just ball runners. And when you have too many good ball runners in a team, that can just sort of mess things up, and I think that's kind of what's happening with the Warriors. This one's hard to predict, as I said. It's not many team list changes as we can see here, and just based off the Broncos and them probably having some better quality experienced players and Reynolds and Ryan James, Payne Haas, Tony Staggs, Corey Oates. I just think that's going to edge them over the line here for this win, and with that being said, I'm going to predict the Warriors 10 to the Broncos 16. Alright guys, now moving on to the fourth game, the Warriors and Broncos. Let's see what Jaqui thinks is going to win.
This year the Warriors haven't been very good and the Broncos have been like a little better than last year, so I'm going to say that the Warriors are going to lose 16 to the Broncos 24.
Alright guys, now moving on to the second game on Saturday, we have the Manly Seagulls versus the Canberra Raiders at Mudgee. Both teams are coming off a win. Manly's first win for the season, which is good for them, but they did it the hard way in front of a really packed out stadium there at Brookvale. They scrapped past Bulldogs, who put up a good fight, but they weren't convincing in their win, and when they're not back to their best yet, so this will be a good game to see if they can get another win and be more consistent, which they need to be. For the Raiders, they have been inconsistent this year, but they were down 22-0 I think against the Titans, and they brought it back on the second half and won 24-22, which is amazing in terms of their mentality and their ability to be able to do that, which is a good sign. Like, even if they're scrappy dubs or they only win by a couple points, at least they're winning, and that's the important thing, especially for the Raiders. This game, it's hard to predict this one because I think these teams are quite evenly balanced. The team list is pretty much the same as last week as well, but the fact this one is at Manly's home ground, and I think Manly are probably just better side, I'm going to say the Manly are going to win 17 to the Raiders 16. Alright guys, now moving on to this game between Manly and Raiders, let's see who Jaqui thinks will win.
I think it'll be a very close game, but Manly have been quite shocking this season, even though they have all of their star players still playing. So I'm going to say that Manly is going to lose 12 to the Raiders 14.
Alright guys, now moving on to the 7:30 game, the last game of Saturday, we have the Cowboys and the Roosters here at Queensland Country Bank Stadium in Townsville. The Cowboys have won their last two games, whereas the Roosters lost and were more inconsistent again for this season when they lost to the Rabbitohs. They put in a pretty disappointing performance for their standards, and for a team that I thought was going to be in the top 4, maybe challenging for the premiership, they have started the season quite poorly, and I expect a response this week against the Cowboys, who were actually really good against the Broncos over the weekend. The thing that's impressed me most about the Cowboys is the fact their defense has been so good. They have not been leaking many points. They leaked 6 in the first 2 weeks and 6 for the majority of the Broncos game until late on. I think they conceded 1 try, and even one of the Broncos tries they scored was really fluky and lucky, and I thought one of the Broncos players were probably offside. But with that being said, I think the Cowboys have been really good. They've been playing as a whole unit, so this game's going to be quite interesting. I can see how you could lean towards the Cowboys in this game, and I think there's a chance they can win this game, especially being at home. There's a very good chance they can win, but I think the Roosters are a quality side. They probably have the better players on paper, and they should win this game, but with that being said, I think it's going to be really close as well, so I'm going to predict the Cowboys 18 to the Roosters 20. Alright guys, let's see who Jaqui thinks is going to win between the Cowboys and Roosters.
So the Cowboys have actually been doing alright this season, and the Roosters have been doing quite inconsistent, but I do still think the Roosters are going to pull this off, with the Cowboys 16 and the Roosters winning 22.
Alright guys, now moving on to the Sunday game at 4 PM, we have the Storm versus the Bulldogs. I think this game is pretty obvious who the favourites are. The Storm, they're getting back to their best, even though they lost last week to the Eels. They had some good patches and good performances from some players. I just think they're getting their consistency up, and they're going to start being quite consistent now. For the Bulldogs, they've lost 2 in a row. They haven't looked that great. They're still struggling to score points, and it's still going to take them time to click into gear with all their new recruits and stuff. This game's going to be the Storm home ground, and I can't see anything but a Storm win here, and I think they're going to win quite comfortably. Team lists, they look pretty much the same as last week, and because of that, I'm going to predict the Storm 34 to the Dogs 12. Alright guys, moving on to the 4 PM game, the Dogs and the Storm. Let's see who Jaqui thinks will win.
I think the Storms will definitely overpower the Bulldogs. I think the Storms are going to win 30 to the Bulldogs 16.
Alright guys, now moving on to the last game of the round, we have the Parramatta Eels versus the St George Illawarra Dragons at 6 PM Sunday. This game here is going to be an interesting game. There's a few outs for both teams. Obviously Ray Stone's done his ACL and that heroic try he got to get them to win last week. And then for the Dragons, Cody Ramsey is out and Jaden Sewer is out as well. The Dragons have lost their last 2 games and the Eels won obviously last week. And the Eels are looking probably the better of the 2 sides so far in this season. On paper, the Eels have the better side. The outside backs are still, that's probably a weak area for the Eels compared to probably the Dragons. I feel like the Dragons favour them in that positional area, but besides that, the Eels are quite a better side on paper compared to Dragons. This game's going to be played at the Eels' home ground, and I just think the Eels are probably going to win this game just based on their quality that they have. I think the Dragons are going to put in a decent performance because they've been quite competitive so far this season, but they just don't have that star quality or whatever it is that other teams have to be able to beat the top sides above them, and because of that, I think the Eels are going to win this game 28-18. Alright guys, now the final game, Eels and Dragons. Let's see who Jaqui thinks will win.
Well, the Eels had a fantastic game last week with them pulling off a dub against Storm. So I think they're going to go back-to-back dubs again and win 24-14 against the Dragons.
Alright guys, so now on screen I've got a visual guys of the tips that we have for this week. Obviously there's my tips and there's Jackie's tips guys, and that will also conclude the end of this video. So if you guys like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. That'll help out the channel a lot. Drop your comments on who you guys think will win and I'll be sure to check them out guys. And if you want to be a guest for next week's episode, drop a comment as well and I'll try to pick someone to do these tips with next week. So with that being said guys, thanks for watching and take care.